My name is Mike Brais, and I am the president of Deep Roots Craft Cannabis. Deep Roots is ready to fill the void of high-end, craft-quality products in the emerging multi-billion-dollar Massachusetts cannabis market. Our business is cultivating and producing branded cannabis flower, infused edibles, and concentrates. We will be wholesaling those products to dispensary partners throughout the state. And right now, our entire focus is on the emerging Massachusetts recreational market. What separates us is craft. As many of you may well know, the demand for craft cannabis or high-end cannabis products is rapidly expanding in mature Western markets such as California and Oregon. Craft cannabis products such as those are not available here in the Massachusetts market yet, and we're poised to fill this void. What makes craft cannabis craft? Well, it starts with your flower, of course, and that is unique and stable genetics that have cannabinoid and terpene profiles that are widely varied. You need to be working with a manageable canopy size that you can give individual attention to each plant and ensure that you don't have any deficiencies or problems. Another thing that's very, very important is carefully hand trimming that flower. Many large volume producers are putting their flower through automated machines, and what you end up doing is losing a lot of the trichomes that hold the important THC and other cannabinoids. And finally, you need to dry and cure your products properly. If you do not dry and cure your product properly, like many of the high volume operators in the state right now, you end up with a brittle, dust-like product that is really not that enjoyable. So you start with that craft flower, and that's the base for all of our products. That includes our award-winning concentrates, small batch gourmet edibles, looking at and focusing on regional-based things such as saltwater taffies, and then putting those products into functional and beautiful packaging that keeps your product airtight so it does not degrade over time, and it is that eye appeal on the shelf. And of course, as a wholesaler, we need to make sure that our products are being sold at reputable high-end dispensaries. So what are consumers looking for? They're not just looking to get high. That has been shown across the board. They're looking to be relaxed. They're looking for some kind of social connection. They're looking for enhancement of their daily activities. But right now, Massachusetts consumers severely lack the products that are meeting those needs, and they lack the knowledge to make those educated purchases. And that's where we need to step in. So what's the market look like right now? The Massachusetts market potential is at least Colorado's, which is doing $2 billion a year. We have a larger population. We have a significantly higher population density. Our average income is about $12,000 more. And just in general, we have a very overall acceptance of cannabis. As of today, through the first 20 months of sales, we've done $1 billion. So our market is growing explosively after a very slow, regulated start. At the end of 2019, we had 33 operating dispensaries, and in October of this year, we've gotten up to 82. And thus far, we've doubled sales, and that's even with a 8-week shutdown due to COVID. Our market is transforming rapidly. In 2019, I mentioned there was 33 operating dispensaries. All of these dispensaries cultivated and manufactured their own products that they sold. And they were also focused on medical. They were co-located. This year, we had about 50 more that opened up, and many of those were recreational only. But what you can see is that the companies that have now been licensed but have yet to open, 50% of those do not cultivate or manufacture their own supply. So they're starved for product. And before too long, it's estimated that we're going to have around 300 dispensaries in the Commonwealth. Supply is extremely constrained right now. As opposed to out in the Western market where the market's flooded, cannabis is selling for around 3 times what it is selling for out west. Just last week, the average wholesale cost of a pound of cannabis was $4,100. The demand is there. As Tim mentioned, we have signed many dispensaries. It's actually 19 as of now that want to carry our products and have indicated a certain volume that they'd like to carry. That's allowed us to sell everything that we can, to pre-sell everything that we can produce for the first 2 years of operation before our planned expansion. This is our partnership network here. And as you can see, we have a pretty good footing across the populated areas of the state. The eastern part of the state is significantly more populated. We have a presence in the major cities such as Boston, Worcester, and Springfield, and our focus is on border towns because right now those are the highest volume. To the south, we have Rhode Island and Connecticut, which have both yet to legalize recreational. And to the north, we have Vermont and New Hampshire. Both of which are in the process but have yet to get rolling. And to the west, New York is in the same situation. So our focus is on high volume, high end retail outlets. Our team, we put together a team of experts in every area to run the business in management, strategy, marketing, cultivation, production, operational, physical, and IT systems. Our CFO, George, is a Harvard MBA. Our production team of Tim and Henry, they're very well respected in the community here in Massachusetts and actually Henry just last week won both first and second place for best concentrates in Massachusetts at the annual Harvest Cup in Worcester. So what we have done, we built a leadership team with outstanding business, operational, and product expertise. We've raised $750,000 to get us to the point where we are now, which we've perfected our sophisticated business plan and enterprise model. We've occupied our facility and obtained all required municipal approvals. That's quite a stumbling block for a lot of companies because the requirements vary significantly, even throughout the Commonwealth itself. With each municipality asking for different things. We've acquired an option to purchase the land that surrounds our facility that's going to allow us to expand our cultivation. That's just under 12 acres of land. We've developed industry recognition and market presence through our social media marketing, our in-person at events, and so on. As I mentioned earlier, we've attracted strategic partnerships with 19 high-end dispensaries that have signed the dotted line. We have another dozen or so that would like to work with us. However, until we expand, we're not going to be able to supply all these individuals. And most importantly, we obtained our license in July that will allow us to produce and wholesale recreational cannabis products. So what's coming up next? We have a 6-month build-out process, which will be followed up immediately with 3.5 to 4 months of cultivation and processing that will allow us to commercialize in September. By October of 2022, we look to expand our cultivation from 5,000 square feet of canopy all the way up to 25,000. And then after that, we will leverage our brand recognition to sustain growth through things like a social consumption lounge or other ventures. A little bit about our financial situation. This coming year, as I mentioned, we'll be getting commercialized in September, which will allow us to do about $5.5 million in revenue. And that translates to $2.2 million in profit that over 5 years will grow to $51 million in revenue and $27.5 million in profit after taxes. So this is what we're looking for. We need a grand total of $5 million to commence operations. So our offer is for a $2.5 million investment in our company, which is 10% of our total fully diluted shares at $125 a share. We'll be leveraging that with between $2 and $2.5 million in debt financing. And as you can see on the left here, we've broken down the requirements to get started. And what does that mean for an investor? We're looking at an internal rate of return of 38%. a 5.2 time return on your investment. Currently, we have a $14.8 million net present value with a cumulative dividends of $9.7 million over 10 years. And the break-even point comes in about 3 years. So that's what I have here, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. That was an excellent job you did. We're waiting for some questions to come in. As I see that we have several attendees here that have already been making some noise in the chat and made a lot of comments about the business itself and a lot of great things that you're doing. I saw some mention of the great partnerships, which is obviously, that is a huge difference maker. Not a lot of companies can come out the gate, build partnerships. The Massachusetts market is a strong market in your space. I know this because it's surpassing Nevada very quickly. We were close to that $1 billion mark in the Nevada market. The billion markets are the ones that are in the billions are Washington, California, Colorado, Nevada, now Massachusetts. I think Michigan's going to be there, Chicago, or not just Chicago, but the whole entire state of Illinois. So there's a lot of growth in the industry. As we're waiting for some questions.
I see there's a question in the chat there.
There is a question.
I'd be very happy to answer that question. So that's something that we have definitely thought about. Although,
Mike, let me just read the question.
Yeah, absolutely.
The question, so the audience can't see the question yet. The question that you're referring to, is that the valuation question, Mike?
The multi-state operator question.
Okay, great. So that's in the chat.
Yeah.
Mike, do you want to read the question and then answer the question? Then I'm not seeing that question.
Absolutely. The question is from Shane, and he's asking, have you thought about becoming a multi-state operator? So that's something, that we've seen a lot of the multi-state operators really struggling with the difference in regulation between state to state. It seems to be a major problem. You see the headlines of these large MSOs that are just hemorrhaging money, and that's the reason. The requirements are way too different from state to state, and it's not just reporting requirements. It's also things like the kind of nutrients you can use, the kind of pest management plans that you can use. It goes that far down, and it makes it very difficult to have a conducive operation. So, it's something we've considered. We're thinking about it more regionally as time goes on, but right now we're 100% focused on Massachusetts.
So, Mike, there's a question that just came in here from Ulysses, and the question is, can you repeat the valuation again? Can you talk about your valuation?
Yeah, absolutely. We're valuating ourselves at $25 million. That is I can actually pop right back into that if people would like. Let's see here. Yeah, we valued ourselves at $25 million. It's through the discounted cash flow model. Our CFO, George, would be more than happy to answer a lot more specific questions about financing and the networking. But we valued ourselves at 25. We believe we can hit 50, but that's going to require us our full expansion. So there's the reason for that valuation.
Very good. And there's another question here coming from Bianca. The question is, how do you plan to maintain your position in the Massachusetts markets as more craft cannabis companies become licensed and operational?
Well, see, the beautiful thing about that is that right now we have somewhere around I want to say we're close to 1 million square feet of cultivation going on in Massachusetts, somewhere in that range. And none of it, it's all high volume. So it would take quite a bit for the craft market to be flooded. We're not going into this expecting that we're going to get a higher wholesale price because we're craft. But over time, as the overall price drops, we see us having the ability to retain some of that margin.
Excellent. Another question here coming from Scott. The question is, how many contracts did you say you had, and from a baseline, and how much is your sales baseline?
Yeah, so we've signed 19 dispensaries, and they really all vary. We have some dispensaries that have 5 checkout stations, and we have others that we've signed that have 20 checkout stations. So they're very large. So the average order is looking like around 25 pounds of flower per average dispensary, 1,000 grams of concentrate, and 1,000 packets of 100 milligram edibles per month. So the average order per dispensary that we've signed is in the range of 150,000. Now, I do want to stress that as we come out of this, we've signed 19 dispensaries, but at that level, at 25 pounds per month and the other numbers I mentioned, we really can support 8 to 10 dispensaries. So we're going to have to be very selective about where we decide to launch our brand, and then those other dispensaries are very well aware that over time they'll be able to not only bring in more products, but also we'll be able to expand our network a little more.
That's a good problem to have, Mike, to be selective, where you're actually being selective on to which dispensaries are there. Can you talk a little bit more about that, the sort of the brand strategy of being that premium craft cannabis? And I want you to, if you could discuss that a little bit. I know we've had a little bit of conversation about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, our dispensary partners, I'm sorry, I was actually reading the Q&A. Can you repeat that?
Sure. So you talked about, more, it's a good problem to have, that you have to be selective. You have more demand than you can actually fulfill. And so you're going to be a little more selective with the dispensaries that you're actually in. And that's also part of your brand strategy, to be that premium craft cannabis. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit more about that strategy and how you plan to maintain that strategy?
Yeah, something that's very important for us is, we mentioned how we're going to be selective with the dispensaries. So that doesn't just mean what the dispensary looks like. It doesn't mean that's just the foot traffic. It means they need to be sure that they're making their bud tenders available to us so that we can educate them on our products. We need to make sure that they're going to allow us to come in there once, twice a month to do pop-ups and have face-to-face interactions with the consumers. And here in Massachusetts, you have to have 2 people in all delivery vehicles at all times. So the way we envision that is we have 1 driver, and it'll shift every time. 1 week it may be our head of cultivation that goes on the delivery to do the pop-up. The next week it could be someone from our kitchen who specializes in making chocolate that's going, so that they have the actual experts that are there talking to the individual consumers in the retail outlets.
Excellent.
So let me see this Q&A here.
We have a couple more questions in the Q&A there, Mike, and maybe you could just indicate there's a couple of them for you. And the question here from Scott is the ROI that you discussed earlier, is that based on the 9 dispensaries?
No, that's based on what we can produce in our facility. And then again, after 2022, what we can produce with our expanded canopy. Excellent.
So it's based on total production. And as you mentioned, the total production is already pre-sold for the next 2 years.
Right, right. And one thing I did fail to mention is that our license type allows us to buy up to 2,000 pounds of third-party biomass, and that's going to allow us to boost up our, for example, our edibles. You know, we don't have to use our premium flour, because a lot of that trim or even popcorn or even some of the bee buds will be going for concentrate products. So, you know, it's not quite as important to have a very craft flour going into your edibles. You know, you're pulling out the THC, you're pulling out the, your full spectrum distillate.
Excellent. Now, there's another question here, comes anonymously. So how do you plan to condition the undereducated Massachusetts market? And maybe you can talk about, that education process. What does that mean to be an uneducated Massachusetts market? So there's a lot here. There's a lot of meaning.
Yeah, this is a good one. I could go for about 2 days on this one, but let's just make it. Let me give you an example. We've had a dispensary that was a potential dispensary partner that told us, we are only going to buy something from you if it has at least 25% THC. You know what we said? You're not the right outlet for us. Because that is what folks know right now. They're looking at THC percentage. They're not looking at your terp profiles. They're not looking at your rare cannabinoids that are in there. You know, one of my favorite things that I'd love to bring to the market is land-raised sativas. Now, many people aren't familiar with that, but a land-raised sativa, as opposed to a hybrid or an indica-dominant flower, typically takes around 3 times as long to flower out and finish. So right now, that market is not going to pay 3 times the price for a land-raised sativa flower. However, that is a very, very, very different experience than your hybrid or your indica dominant flower. It's very euphoric. It's very energetic. I mean, I've gone on hikes where I did a 3-peak 10-mile hike and I was smoking joints the whole time. And it's because it's so energetic. It's just a very different thing. And so that's something that we need to do. You know, we need to start educating people about that. And maybe that means that we grow at a 12, 13-week flowering sativa rather than a full 25-week flowering landrace, to start making people understand what they're missing out on. And that's going to take time, but education is very, very important. And that's through social media, through influencers, through our pop-ups, and just about as many, and all the, of course, the in-person events once the plague's done.
Excellent job.